Hey everyone, welcome to the show. We're diving into Tyler O'Neill's The Woketopus today.
Oh, yeah. This one
Yeah.
is making some waves.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So imagine a world where, you know, like the government you think you voted for
Right.
isn't actually the one
Mm-hmm. Oh,
making the decisions,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's like this hidden network, like
Yeah.
working behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and it's fueled by like all this secret money.
Right.
And they're just like pushing policies that like a lot of Americans feel don't represent them at all. That's kind of like the scary picture that
Yeah.
O'Neill's painting in this book.
Yeah. You know what I think is so interesting about the Woketopus is like how it really challenges our like basic understanding of how our government works. Like we all learn about the three branches of government,
Yeah.
executive, legislative, judicial.
Right.
And O'Neill's arguing that there's this like fourth branch, the bureaucracy.
A bureaucracy.
Yeah, and it's almost operating like a shadow government, almost like a monarchy.
Whoa, that's a big claim.
Yeah.
Okay, so like how does this so-called fourth branch actually like, make its influence felt, right? Like how does it do it?
Yeah.
The book uses a really good example, the Clean Air Act.
Yeah.
You would think like a law about clean air, like
Right.
everybody would be for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like that wouldn't be a controversial thing.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. Congress often passes these laws that are very vague. They're
Right.
very broad goals. And then agencies like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, they're tasked with filling in all the details through regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And those regulations, those are the things that have like the real world consequences
Right.
for businesses, for jobs, for our daily lives.
Yeah.
And often those are being made by unelected officials.
So the politicians can be like, oh yeah, we're for clean air.
Of course we're for clean air.
We all love it, but like, we don't want to deal with the messy details.
Right.
Exactly. And then if people complain about the regulations, they could just be like, oh, well, it wasn't us. It was the EPA.
Talk to them.
Right.
Right.
It's like this really clever way to not be held responsible.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's just one example. The
Right.
book argues that this same dynamic is happening all over the place in
Yeah.
a lot of different areas of policy,
Right.
education, labor, immigration.
Yeah. And, you can't talk about like hidden influence and stuff without talking about money, right?
Of course.
And so the book introduces this concept of dark money, which is basically funds from donors that we don't know.
Right.
And it's used to influence, political outcomes.
Of course. Yeah.
So it's like secret money flowing through this
Yeah.
hidden network of nonprofits.
Right. It almost sounds like a conspiracy theory, right? Like
It kind of does, yeah.
a vast shadowy network that's manipulating our government.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's so important to look at like the specifics. And O'Neill in this book, he does a really good job of like naming names.
Yeah, he does.
He points to organizations like the 1630 Fund,
Right.
the New Venture Fund, Arabella Advisors.
Right.
And these groups are kind of like hubs. They're channeling money from like wealthy donors to smaller organizations
All right.
that are pushing very specific policies.
Like, it really makes you wonder, like, who's actually in control?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And that leads to the core of O'Neill's argument,
Yeah.
that this whole network that he calls the Woketopus
Yeah.
is pushing a specific agenda.
Right.
And he thinks it's an agenda that's totally out of touch with a lot of Americans.
Totally.
And he kind of dives into three main areas where he sees this Woketopus at work:
Yeah.
education, labor, and immigration.
Let's start with education. What's the Woketopus up to in our schools?
Well, one of the most controversial things in the book is about this push for critical race theory in schools.
Right.
And O'Neill argues that groups like the National Education Association or the NEA, which is the biggest teachers union in the country, are really trying to shut down anybody who
Yeah.
opposes this
Yeah.
curriculum.
They don't want to hear it.
Yeah. So it's not just about what's being taught.
Right.
It's also about
Yeah.
shutting down debate and just controlling the whole.
Controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the book doesn't just stop there with CRT. It also highlights the American Federation of Teachers.
Yeah.
The AFT's role in school closures during the pandemic.
Yeah, everybody was
Yeah.
stuck at home and
Huh?
doing school through Zoom.
Right. And now they're taking credit for student loan forgiveness.
Oh, wow.
But O'Neill's asking, were the school closures actually necessary? And what's the, long-term impact going to be on students? Did they really learn?
Right.
They fall behind.
Yeah, it's a really tough issue.
Yeah.
It's really complicated.
Yeah.
and there's not, like, easy answers.
Right.
But it does make you think about, like, who actually benefits from all these policies?
Right.
And are they really what's best for the students?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's a question that the book keeps asking, who benefits? And a lot of times the answer goes back to this Woketopus and its agenda.
Okay, so let's move on to labor.
Eh.
How is this Woketopus messing with, like, the workplace?
Yeah. Well, O'Neill argues that the Department of Labor has been basically captured by unions,
Uh-huh.
and he uses the push to, like, reclassify independent contractors as employees as, like, a prime example of this.
I've heard about this. Like, he talks about that AB5 law in
Yeah.
California, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The one that could, like, totally change things for millions of, like,
Yeah.
freelancers and
Right.
independent businesses.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And it goes even further than that. He also looks at this tactic called sue and settle.
I'm unsettled.
Yeah, where activist groups, they sue government agencies to force policy changes.
Wow.
But they do it without any public input.
So instead of going through, like, the normal process of making laws,
Right, exactly.
they're just, like, going to the courts and doing it that way.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's not just about environmental regulations, which is the example they use.
Okay.
It's happening in healthcare and technology.
It makes you wonder how much of what's going on in government is actually being driven by this kind of, like, backroom dealing.
Yeah, that's what the Woketopus really makes you think about. It's not
Yeah.
just about the actual policies. It's about, like, a fundamental change
Right.
in how power actually works.
Yeah, like who has it
Who has been.
and how they use it.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is getting pretty intense.
It is. It is. Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It is.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how the Woketopus says that this network of organizations is, like, influencing policy
Right.
in areas like education and labor.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about immigration, which is a huge topic right now.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So how does, like, this supposed Woketopus fit into this whole immigration debate? Like, the book is saying that they're really important in shaping, like, actual policy and maybe even impacting elections.
Yeah, O'Neill argues that this network of nonprofits that he calls the immigration industrial complex is, like, actively working to weaken our border security and resettle migrants inside the U.S.
So it's not just about, like, advocating for, more open borders or whatever.
Right.
It's more like they're creating a whole system that benefits them,
Right,
both financially and also, like,
Influential.
ideologically. Yeah.
right.
And O'Neill points to their opposition to policies like the Secure Border Act
Okay.
as evidence of this. Like,
Yeah.
that act is trying to, like, make the border more secure,
Right,
which obviously goes against the goals of groups that want open borders.
right, yeah. But, I mean, isn't there, like, a humanitarian side to this, too?
Of course. Like, a lot of these organizations are helping people who are, like, escaping violence,
Right.
horrible situations.
Right. The book recognizes that, these are very complicated
Yeah.
humanitarian issues.
Yeah.
But it's also worried about what could happen if there's too much immigration that isn't controlled.
Yeah, like, what does that mean for the people coming in
Right.
and also for the country as a whole?
Exactly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the, like, most controversial parts of the book is about how illegal immigration could affect elections.
Yeah.
Like, O'Neill's suggesting that even if just a small number of undocumented immigrants register to vote,
Yeah.
it could change the results of
Right.
close elections.
Right. And it's important to remember the book doesn't, like, give any hard proof
Right.
that there's widespread voter fraud happening.
Right.
But it does make you think, like, do we really trust our elections?
Yeah.
And do we need more transparency in the system?
Yeah.
Like, just to make sure everything's fair?
He even mentions those flyers
Oh, yeah.
that were found
Yeah.
at a migrant resource center.
Right.
And they were basically telling people to vote for Biden so he'd keep the border open.
Yeah. It makes you wonder if it was, like, coordinated to change the election results.
Yeah, like, who made these flyers?
Yeah.
It's sus.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we have to be careful, though. It's important to, like, separate speculation from facts.
Yeah.
But these stories definitely make you raise an eyebrow,
Yeah.
They make you wonder, like, is there something more going on here? Maybe we
Yeah.
need to investigate this further.
Okay, so we've got this network of groups pushing for open borders and maybe even messing with elections.
Right.
But who are these people? Like, the book mentions the ACLU,
Right.
which is, like, known for defending civil liberties.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little confused, like, how do they fit in?
Well, the ACLU has definitely been involved in a ton of lawsuits about immigration. They're usually against policies that they think are, like, too strict
Okay.
or inhumane.
Right.
But what's interesting is O'Neill points out that they've actually sued to block some of the things that Biden has tried to do
Right.
to deal with the border crisis.
That doesn't really make sense. If they're all about open borders,
Right.
wouldn't they support Biden when he's trying to, like, manage all the people coming in?
Yeah, it seems kind of backwards.
Right.
But it shows you just how complicated this whole immigration debate is.
Yeah, it's messy.
Even groups that, like, generally agree on
Right.
the big picture
Yeah.
can have totally different ideas on how to actually do things.
You mentioned earlier that this network gets money from, like, dark money sources. Does the book, like, name any names?
It does. Remember that Swiss billionaire, Hans-Jörg Wyss?
Uh-huh.
He's back. Turns out he's a major donor to a bunch of groups that are all about immigration advocacy.
Okay.
They're pushing for more open borders.
Right.
And they're criticizing anyone who wants to enforce immigration laws more strictly.
So it's like the same players and
Yeah.
the same money just
Yeah.
popping up in all these different areas. It seems like there's, like, a bigger plan, you know?
Yeah, it's not just about immigration either.
Oh, really?
The book also says that this network has influence on other stuff,
Okay.
like the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Whoa.
Okay.
This is getting complicated.
Yeah, it gets really complex.
So, like, how does the Woketopus play a role in, like, global stuff?
Well, remember those awful Hamas attacks back in 2023?
Yeah, that was terrible.
The ones that, like, really escalated the violence over there?
Yeah.
O'Neill says that how Biden reacted to those attacks
Uh-huh.
was influenced by certain groups within this network.
Okay, so these groups were, like, criticizing Israel
Right.
and pushing Biden to not be so tough on Hamas.
Exactly, even when Israel was getting ready to retaliate.
Wow.
And O'Neill specifically mentions the Council on American Islamic Relations. CARE?
Right.
They've gotten money from those same dark money sources.
Yeah.
And they've been really vocal about how much they disagree with Israel's policies.
It's crazy how, like, immigration, the Middle East,
Yeah.
campaign finance,
It's all connected.
all kind of, like, coming back to this network.
Yeah, that's what makes the Woketopus so interesting.
Right.
It forces you to think about what's really going on.
Yeah.
You know, beyond what you see on the surface.
Right.
Could there be these powerful groups working behind the scenes,
Yeah.
shaping things, without us really knowing?
Totally.
The question we have to ask.
Okay, so we've seen how this Woketopus is maybe influencing immigration,
Right.
elections,
Yeah.
and even, like, foreign policy.
Right.
But what about, like, regular people?
Right.
Does the book talk about how this affects, like, everyday Americans?
It does.
Okay.
And O'Neill says one of the scariest areas is education.
Right. We talk about, like, critical race theory,
Yeah.
but the book goes deeper.
It does.
Like, how is this network trying to silence people and control what's being said in schools?
This is where it gets really personal for parents,
Yeah.
especially after the pandemic.
Right, because when schools shut down
Mm-hmm.
and kids were at home,
Right.
parents could see exactly what was being taught.
Yeah.
And some of them were, like, really freaked out.
Yeah, they didn't like what they saw.
And then when they tried to speak up
Right.
at school board meetings,
Yeah.
they were, like, treated really badly.
They're attacked.
Called names, like racist, transphobic,
Right.
even domestic terrorists.
Right. Just for sharing their opinions.
And the book talks about that crazy thing that happened
Oh, yeah.
in Loudoun County, Virginia,
Yeah.
where that dad got arrested.
At a school board meeting.
Yeah, just for, like, speaking his mind.
He was worried about a sexual assault that had happened
Right.
in a school bathroom.
And it turned out that the person who did it was a boy who said they were gender fluid. And the school let him use the girls' bathroom,
Right.
even though parents had been complaining about
Yeah,
it.
they were concerned.
And O'Neill's saying that this whole thing shows, like, a disturbing pattern
Yeah.
where schools care more about, like, ideology
Right.
than they do about kids being safe.
Yeah, they're putting ideology before kids' safety.
And he doesn't just blame the schools. He also says the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland
Right.
is in on this whole thing of trying to
Right.
silence parents.
Yeah.
He talks about that memo that Garland sent out
Mm-hmm.
telling the FBI to investigate threats against school board members.
Right. People were saying that this was a way to intimidate parents
Right.
and shut them up.
Yeah.
Basically saying, if you don't agree with what we're doing,
Yeah.
you're a potential terrorist.
That's scary.
It is scary. Yeah.
Like, is the government actually being used against parents
It makes you wonder.
who are just trying to protect their kids?
Yeah. And it's not just about education, according to O'Neill.
Okay.
This crackdown on people who disagree
Uh-huh.
is happening with other hot-button issues,
Like what?
like abortion.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, things are about to get even more controversial.
Yeah, this is a touchy subject.
It is.
So how does the book fit abortion into this whole Woketopus thing?
O'Neill says that the Biden administration,
Right.
influenced by pro-choice groups,
Uh-huh.
has gone after pro-life activists.
Okay.
They're using the Justice Department
Uh-huh.
to target people who protest outside abortion clinics.
He mentions that case of Mark Hug.
Yeah, the guy who was arrested by a SWAT team.
Right in front of his kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was for supposedly assaulting a clinic escort.
Right.
And even though the charges were dropped eventually,
Uh-huh.
O'Neill uses this story, and others like it,
All right.
to show what he sees as a trend of silencing people who are against abortion.
He's saying that the Biden administration has put pro-abortion activists in important positions.
Yeah.
Like Kristen Clark.
Yeah, she's the head of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division.
And she's been a big advocate for abortion rights.
Right. And O'Neill says her appointment is another example of the Woketopus at work.
So the book is arguing that this is all part of a bigger plan.
Right.
To make anyone who challenges, like, the left's ideology look bad.
Yeah, to demonize them and shut them up.
And that creates, like, an atmosphere where
Yeah.
people are afraid to speak their minds.
Exactly.
So, like, what do we do now? If this Woketopus is real, how do we stop it?
Well, the good news is the book does offer some solutions.
Okay, good.
And we'll talk about those in the last part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Woketopus. We've been going through some pretty wild stuff
Yeah, it's a lot.
about how this network of organizations is, like, maybe controlling policy and even trying to, like, change what people think.
Yeah, it's like, are we really in control?
Right. It's kind of scary.
It is.
We've talked about the Clean Air Act, immigration, Israel-Palestine, even education and abortion.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
And this whole Woketopus thing keeps popping up.
It's like a recurring villain.
It is, yeah.
You can't escape it.
Like, are they really everywhere, pulling all the strings?
But it makes you think.
So, like, if this is actually happening, what can we do about it?
Right.
Does the book, like, offer any solutions? Or are we just doomed?
Well, the book ends with a call to action.
Okay, good.
O'Neill lays out steps we can take to push back against this network and, like, take back our democracy.
Okay, so what's the plan? How do we fight this Woketopus?
Well, one of the biggest things, according to O'Neill, is that Congress needs to step up.
Okay.
He thinks they've given too much power to the administrative state.
Right.
Like, unelected bureaucrats are making decisions that should be made by people we actually voted for.
So we got to, like, rebalance the power.
Exactly.
But how do we actually do that?
Well, O'Neill says Congress needs to use its power over money more effectively.
Okay.
You know, they control the funding for all these agencies.
Right.
And they can use that to, like, control them and hold them accountable.
That's simple enough.
Right. Just cut their funding if they don't behave.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's a lot tougher in reality.
Yeah. Those agencies have a lot of power.
Oh, yeah. They're entrenched.
And they've got powerful friends.
They do, and lots of money.
So it's not going to be easy.
It won't be. But O'Neill thinks it's super important for Congress to take back its job as the main lawmaker
Okay.
and make sure that the people we elected are the ones making the decisions.
Right. Not some unelected bureaucrats.
Exactly.
Okay, so Congress has got to get its act together.
Yeah.
But what about us? Like, regular people?
Right.
Can we do anything?
Absolutely. O'Neill says the most important thing we can do is raise awareness.
Okay.
Like, the more people know about how this Woketopus supposedly works,
Yeah.
the more they'll demand change.
So we got to expose them.
Yeah. Shine a light on their tactics.
And hold them accountable.
Exactly. Knowledge is power.
Right. The more we know, the better we can fight back.
That's the idea. O'Neill also says people need to get involved in politics.
Okay. Like, how?
Vote, contact your representatives, support groups that share your values,
Uh-huh.
and speak up when you disagree with something.
So it's like taking back our democracy,
Yeah.
reminding the people in charge that they work for us.
Exactly. They're accountable to us.
And that's really the message of the Woketopus, right?
Yeah, it's about remembering that we have the power
We the people.
to decide what happens in our country.
Yeah. But we got to be informed
Mhm.
and involved.
Yeah, and ready to fight for what we believe in.
Totally. Well, we've covered a ton of ground today.
We have.
From the crazy bureaucracy to dark money immigration, parental rights.
It's been a wild ride.
It has.
The Woketopus really makes you think about all the stuff happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, and if you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now.
Yeah, or maybe even a little angry.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Those are normal reactions.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is. But don't let those feelings, stop you from doing something.
Right. Channel that energy into action. Read the book. Do your own research.
Yeah. Don't just take our word for it.
Right. And most importantly, get involved.
Yeah.
Talk to people. Share what you've learned. Make your voice heard.
That's the best way to fight this Woketopus.
Yeah.
And make sure our government actually represents us.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great talking about this.
We really want to hear what you think about the Woketopus and all the stuff we've talked about.
Yeah, leave a comment below and let's keep the conversation going.
And that's it for today. See you next time.